各位議員早晨啊，咁我哋而家夠鐘。
Good morning, members. We have a quorum. I call to order the meeting. Item 1, measures to lower the cost of public works projects. We will now invite the government officials to join us. The papers has been set out on the agenda. To facilitate discussion of the item, the Research Office has prepared a fact sheet on the promotion of smart construction technology in selected places. I will now invite the government official to walk us through the paper briefly. Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, members. As the previous meeting, we have briefed members on the reasons for the high construction costs in Hong Kong according to the strategic study on construction costs. 4 major directions have been identified, including optimizing the project procurement model to reduce risk premium, reviewing the design standards and requirements, applying advanced technologies and construction methods, and streamlining the approval process. In accordance with the agenda, today we will focus on the tendering mechanism and procurement models of public works contracts. And in terms of optimizing the procurement model, reviewing the design standards and requirements, there are some strategic measures as well. We have consulted the relevant stakeholders, including the associations of consultants, material suppliers, work contractors, and other departments in the government concerning the directions on applying advanced technologies and construction methods and streamlining the approval process. In later meetings, we will brief members in details on these 2 directions. We understand that there is aspiration from the public and the lawmakers for the government to reduce our construction costs and enhance cost efficiency and utilize more efficiently our public resources. That's why we are going to adopt a pilot model to implement certain strategic measures as well. We will review the success of these measures. And on the principle of rolling out measures once they are ready, we will roll out more measures in the future. Now, we now invite the Deputy Secretary or Principal Assistant Secretary, Mr. Frankie Fong Yuman, to present the PowerPoint to members. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman and members. This is the 4th meeting. I will be briefing members on cost reduction measures. Starting from the 4th quarter last year, we have commenced the strategic study on construction costs to identify the major reasons for the high construction costs in Hong Kong and formulate the detailed way forward for reducing costs of public works projects. On the 19th of July and 24th of September this year, we have given members an overview of the construction costs in Hong Kong and briefed members on the prevailing cost management measures. We have summarized 5 major reasons for high construction costs, that is labor cost, contract risk premium on construction materials and equipment, design standards and requirements, approval process, and project complexity. In view of these major reasons, we have distilled 4 major directions for lowering construction costs, that is optimizing the project procurement model to reduce risk premium, reviewing the design standards and requirements to increase cost effectiveness, applying advanced technologies and construction methods to uplift productivity, and streamlining the approval process to boost work efficiency. Some background information about our tendering mechanism and procurement models. We are adopting the principles of achieving best value for money and maintaining open and fair competition for the procurement of public works contracts. There are 2 there are some registers and lists, and contractors and consultants need to be on the list to be engaged. We adopted two-envelope, two-stage tender approach. Now, for public works projects, technical aspects accounts for 40 to 50% of the overall score. For public works tenders, for consultancy tenders, technical aspects accounts for 63 to 72%. Now, we have in the past eliminated 12 and 7 contracts respectively because of the unreasonably low price. Now, on procurement models, I will be brief. First, DBB, design, bid, and build. This is the traditional procurement model. We will hire a consultancy to engage in detailed design and then award an engineering contract. This applies to most traditional works projects like road works, site formation works, and drainage works. This model comes with a clear delineation of responsibilities, and it can reduce the risk borne by contractors. Second, D&B, design and build model. Now, for this model, the detailed design and construction works of a project will be procured at the same time and undertaken by the contractor. Before procurement, the contractor needs to base the decision on design parameters. Now, this applies to government buildings of greater complexity and also where work plans play a major role. Example includes government buildings of greater complexity and complicated cave-in projects and construction of trunk roads. Now, the contractor can apply the experience in lowering the construction cost. Finally, design, build, and operate model. Under this model, the winning bidder will also be responsible for the operation of the completed facilities within a specified period of time upon completion of the works. The major design parameters and tender requirements and bidding and those conditions on the tender documents will have to be adhered to. Now, examples include landfill extension projects, refuse transfer stations, and district cooling systems. By including the requirements for operating the works in the contract, it will enhance the maintenance and operation of the final products. We have introduced the new engineering contract or NEC form in 2009 to encourage collaborative partnering and bringing the project team together to tackle difficulties, which is conducive to the smooth implementation of the project. The conventional form of contracts previously adopted focused more on the obligations and responsibilities of the two parties, often putting them in adversarial positions. Now, once problems occurred, both parties tended to focus on identifying the responsible party, and hence disputes arose. Now, under NEC, it embraces a collaborative culture through the contract terms of mutual trust and collaboration. It enhances the cost effectiveness and speed of the project. According to statistical analysis, the actual delivery timetable of NEC contracts is on average about 10% faster than conventional ones, and there is a time saving of over 30% on average. Now, starting from July and October this year, we have fully adopted the e-tendering system for the procurement of public works contracts and consultancies to handle the tender exercises for these contracts. It is a one-stop platform, allowing contractors and consultants to view the forecast of tenders, receive notice of invitation to tender, and download tender documents, and submit tenders. It reduces tender costs by shortening the time of preparation and manpower needed. Now, to enhance market competition, we have put in place a bonus score system in the tendering mechanism to allow SMEs to participate in large-scale works projects. By adding the bonus score system, If large consultants bid for a contract in partnership with small and medium companies by way of joint venture or subcontracting, additional bonus scores will be given. Since last year, there are 25 public works contracts that have adopted this system. Among the 21 contracts awarded, they were by way of a joint venture between large and small and medium-sized companies. We also reward contractors to implement cost-effective options to reduce project costs. If that works out, we will reward the contractors by giving them more bonuses. Now, we have also introduced a new provision of innovation and technology into new engineering contracts. Appropriate, innovative, and advanced technology suggestions would be encouraged. For example, site safety, supervision efficiency, energy saving, and decarbonization. This will uplift the productivity and lower project cost. We have drawn on experience of the mainland and advanced overseas countries. Now, under the strategic study, we consider that digitalizing the construction industry can enhance management efficiency. Now, there are numerous examples in the mainland and overseas. Now, in Hong Kong, we have adopted the digital works supervision system, and we have adopted the interdepartmental integrated capital works platform to adopt AI. We have also adopted the Building Technology Research Institute and also other technologies to enhance site safety. On streamlining project design, we encourage the design concept of fitness for purpose and no frills at the design stage. Now, we encourage the adoption of modular integrated construction and multi-trade integrated mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. Now, these methods can enhance the cost effectiveness of the projects. In many advanced countries, there is a robust approval mechanism to monitor public works management. These countries have also established an independent approval authority for third-party review. Now, in Hong Kong, the Project Strategy and Government Office, or PSGO, is responsible for this. Through implementing comprehensive strategic initiatives, providing training and enhancing the cost management mindset and capability of project teams, the PGSO has been enhancing the performance of public works projects. The PSGO has also signed MOUs with CP2M and IPA of Singapore and the UK respectively to uplift project performance by intergovernment exchange. Concerning the specific measures under the 4 directions, we have consulted various stakeholders like consultants, contractors, subcontractors, labor unions, trade associations and institutions, as well as public organizations and departments. The directions were agreed by the stakeholders. First, on enhancing procurement models. Under this direction, having drawn reference to successful experience overseas and in the country, we will roll out a pilot scheme for individual innovative procurement models and will evaluate the effectiveness when they are ready. Now, we will adopt a framework contract procurement model. So under this model, we will stabilize the rollout of projects so that the contractors can draw out a plan. So with steady construction volume, service providers can make work plans in a more effective manner. This can streamline procurement process and reduce procurement cost. Now, we have been adopting this process in a land survey process. By 2025, we will be able to evaluate its effectiveness and consider adopting this model for more projects. Second, we will adopt early contractor involvement procurement model in suitable public works contracts. This is called ECI. Contractors will be brought in at an earlier stage of the project so that they can contribute their experience to enhance the design and select the most cost-effective construction methods for the critical parts of the projects. Under this model, prior to the construction stage, the contractor is already involved. Now, the contractor will be able to identify and propose potential risk of the project as early as possible so as to formulate the most cost-effective design and construction method and reduce risk.
We also propose the adoption of direct procurement or central procurement model. That means the government will directly to contractors and suppliers adopt direct procurement to reduce the risk premiums arising from subcontracting. This can also avoid cost delay or payment delay. We've already piloted this model, for example, in light public housing projects, and we have also adopted modular integrated construction method. In the wastewater treatment plant projects, we're also adopting this method. We'll also work on central procurement model. For suitable construction materials and components, we are exploring the adoption of this central procurement model. This procurement model can take advantage of bulk purchasing to enhance cost effectiveness. This can allow us to better manage the supply chain, and manufacturers and suppliers can also make planning according to the timing of demand for construction materials. We will carry out study on central procurement in 2025, including the impact of this model on the market, the mode of operation, and its cost effectiveness. We'll consult the relevant stakeholders. We will also see whether it is feasible to implement MIC method and steel reinforcement through this model. We'll also review directions of design standards and requirements. We've already commissioned the BTRI to review design standards and requirements. The BTRI will review the building standards as well as design loading requirements of buildings. For example, there is a loading requirement in office buildings. It will also review specifications of different types of equipment. This will all be incorporated into our review work. We'll also review standardizing different designs and requirements across buildings departments as well as other departments responsible for implementing public works projects. We will establish a construction materials library to promote the use of high-quality, cost-effective construction materials from both domestic and international sources. We will establish a materials library, and this can help reduce cost and the time for testing different types of materials. As for other measures to reduce construction costs, we will adopt innovative and advanced technologies as well as construction methods. We will also streamline the approval processes. We will have a more detailed discussion on these in the subsequent meetings of this subcommittee. That's all for my briefing. I'll now open the floor for questions. Mr. Chen Xiuhong, please. 4 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. In the previous meeting, the government provided reasons for the high construction costs in Hong Kong, and I think this paper matches what the previous paper says. The government is improving the procurement models, and it's going to adopt advanced technology as well as streamlining the approval process. I support all these measures. I think these measures are taking the government to the right direction. I think to reduce the construction cost, the government has to implement all these measures effectively. These measures have to be carried out in the short, medium, and long term. In the short term, the government can implement the new procurement models in the new public works projects. Of course, design standards and requirements need to be reviewed as well. If the design standards are too stringent or impractical, of course, that will affect the overall construction costs. The government has been emphasizing the no-frills approach, and I think this is great. Understand that the adoption of advanced technology and the streamlining of approval processes will be discussed in the subsequent meetings. Construction workers work very hard, but their salary costs could account for as high as 30 to 40% of the overall cost of a public works project. Short-term measures include importation of foreign labor. However, in the medium and long term, we really need to adopt advanced technologies. So I look forward to having a discussion with the administration in relation to application of advanced technologies and streamlining the approval process. The trade does not want lengthy approval processes. I think the central procurement model is one of the highlights of today's discussion. I'm glad that the government has taken on board our suggestions. That is, the government is considering adopting a central procurement model or a direct procurement model. I have a couple of concerns here. The central procurement model could probably be used in procuring common materials. For special materials and special equipment, you cannot adopt the central procurement model. The government is now testing the adoption of MIC methods, and construction materials involved are of a huge amount, and steel as well as concrete also need to be procured. For common materials in the coming 3 to 5 years, if the government expects that it will employ a large amount of concrete and steels or standardized materials used for building lifts, I believe you can adopt the central procurement model. However, for special materials like pumps in water plants, I think the government needs to be careful. Supply these materials, and if you're asking another contractor to install these equipment and materials, who will be held accountable if problems arise? I don't want the government to randomly adopt the central or direct procurement model, because we'll need to hold someone accountable if problems arise. I want to know how the government is going to test out the central and direct procurement model. A lot of the public works projects have seen the application of these two types of models already. Permanent Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. We do want to implement these proposed measures as early as possible. We have a short, medium, as well as long-term plan. In the short run, we've talked to the trade, and we think it is, if we find it worthwhile to test out certain models, we will do it as soon as possible. So we are moving in this regard. In the medium and long term, we want to look at it in a more systematic way. In a public works project, different types of materials, parts, and design standards are involved, and we can review all these in a systematic way. We can extract the important parts and prioritize them. We can ask the BTRI to help us in this regard. The productivity of construction workers have lowered because of the aging of workers, and summers in Hong Kong are very hot, and we need to allow time for workers to rest. Therefore, we need to make good use of technology and machinery, and we will touch on this in the subsequent meetings. About the direct and central procurement model. For direct procurement model, it is based on individual projects. We'll see whether in individual projects we can adopt this model with the suppliers. or contractors. For central procurement model, it is a cross-project model. There are different considerations we have to take into account. For example, if we adopt MIC methods in light public housing projects, we can adopt this model, and we have already tested this out in these light public housing projects, and we see that we have been able to reduce construction costs. Steel bars can also be involved in this type of procurement model. We have to see whether there is an impact on the market operation. We have to see how much of these materials we need in a works project. We also have to look at the contract period and what kind of agreement we have entered into with the contractors. Also, we have to look at whether there are warehouses for storing materials and how we are picking up the materials, how many contractors we need in total, which may all affect the overall construction costs. We will carry out a detailed study, and hopefully by next year we'll be able to make some decisions. Chairman, I have a quick point to make. I appreciate that the Development Bureau as well as the Permanent Secretary have certain strategies on this. On procuring common materials, I hope the government will not use this model for materials that will be used in the coming 3 to 5 years, because this may lead to monopoly of a few suppliers. Mr. Chen, I believe the Permanent Secretary has heard your view. I'll please supplement when there is opportunity to do so. Mr. Edward Lau. Thank you, Chairman. I'm glad that the government has included details in this paper on how it's going to improve the situation. In this first round, I'd like to focus on tendering as well as procurement models. On tendering, the government is adopting the double-enveloped two-stage model to avoid any unreasonable tender prices. If you look at the practices in mainland or other overseas countries, sometimes the highest price or the lowest price or tenders are eliminated. Have you thought about whether this model is applicable to Hong Kong, that is to remove the highest and lowest bids? And for procurement models, design, bid, build, as well as design and build are some common models used. In recent years, the government is facing a tight public finance situation. Have you thought about adopting design, build, operate model? Have you also thought about other financing arrangements? DBO may be suitable for district cooling systems and landfill expansions or even incinerators. DBIFO is commonly adopted in the mainland for financing. I've talked to the relevant policy bureaus and asked whether they would adopt DBIFO, and they told me they had not adopted this model before, so it would take time for them to draft the tender documents or implement the tendering exercise. I want to know if departments responsible for public works projects would work with the bureaus to see whether it's possible to implement the DBIFO model. 2 questions.
Yeah.
Mr. Lau. Thank you, Member. We have looked at the bidding system in other places. The two-envelope, two-stage approach has been in use for quite some time, and it has been proven to be effective. Amongst our bids, usually we would receive 10 tender applications, and sometimes just 4 to 5. We would look at every tender letter. If we exclude the highest and the lowest bids, of course, there are some advantages to this. This is adopted in the mainland. But we can't completely rule out the feasibility of an ultra-low bid, because that may be the best choice. Of course, we would pay attention to the practices in the mainland and overseas to identify room for improvement. In terms of procurement, now the DBIF all mentioned by the member is a kind of public-private partnership. In terms of financing, in the private market, the government keeps an open mind if that can reduce the construction costs of our capital works or public works projects. But we need to see whether it is appropriate to adopt this market financing model, because the market would be looking for a return. Now, will our public works project generate commercial values to ensure suitable or reasonable return to the investors? And sometimes our public works infrastructure can generate revenue by way of toll fee and drainage fee and so on. The government has in place an internal control on the fee structure that would affect the commercial viability of the model as well, but we will keep an open mind. Mr. Andrew Lam. Chairman, about the tendering mechanism and project management process, I have some questions. Since the very first step of the tendering process, potential bidders and the government would be investing in the process by way of manpower and time. I think the paper is very well drafted, but I still have some questions. For major government works projects, there is the tender selection board, and also for other projects, there is the engineering and associated consultant selection board. So what is the tendering process and the funding process? Can we try to control the cost and time further? Let me give you a simple example. In selecting a bid, like the PAS said, let's say there are 10 bidders. They would fill out the form and give us the basic information. It comprises several parts: company background, financial capability, and so on. In theory, the company would already have a set template within them. However, in terms of the tendering process, different teams within the company would submit different sets of background data to the government to increase the successful rate. Now, actually, the most important thing is experience. The consultants and the contractors would estimate on the amount of manpower resources needed. That's particularly so for consultants' contracts, but that can vary a lot. Whether it is on a unit basis or overall speaking, the variation in estimation is huge. So that reflects the risk model of the consultant. So how to control the risk? By adopting advanced project management system, the risk can be reduced. For example, the background information I mentioned. Potential bidders would be encouraged to upload their background information onto the system on a regular basis. So when the tenders are being selected, we don't have to conduct another round of assessments on the financial capabilities and the background of the companies. In terms of manpower input, if there can be a direct comparison between the per unit manpower cost of different projects, it can save time for both the government and the bidder. I know we will talk about the use of technology and streamlining vetting procedure next time, so I will skip that today. However, there are lots of predictable risks in the process. That is, in the multi-professional, multidisciplinary conference, there may be conflicting professional views. And when amendments are needed, it may give rise to conflicting ideas. So can we address these risks with an advanced project management system? PAS. Thank you. Mr. Andrew Lam mentioned several practical suggestions. We would surely want to compress the tendering process because it would be burning out the resources on both the government and the bidder's side. We do have a list of approved contractors and consultants. They have to meet a certain level of standard. We don't have to assess ourselves again whether these are qualified contractors or consultants. Now we have the e-bidding or e-tendering system, which has been adopted for consultancy and public works projects. They are fully electronic. This is a good thing. Some colleagues told us that the professionals would be queuing up in front of the scanners to print out the tendering documents. So with the e-system, they can save that cost. In terms of the bid selection process, we adopt a fair and transparent mechanism. So there is not terribly large room for compressing the process here. We need to look at the envelopes and then we look at the price tags and assess whether the price tags are reasonable before awarding the contract. But we can identify some minor room for improvement. Manpower input estimation, this is important, especially for consultancy projects. The major cost on the consultant's side is labor cost in terms of professional and experts. So we would give them an estimation based on comparable projects. We would give them a baseline assessment. If we consider that the return price is too low or unreasonably low, or if the experts lack the expertise required, we will exclude that bid. Now, in the technical envelope, the bidder would be required to submit the qualifications of the experts and the professionals they hired. We have our own register already, so we don't need to work too hard on ascertaining the qualifications. In terms of disputes arising during the process, there are a lot of uncertainties during the process, and there are often conflicting views. Starting from 2009, we have adopted the NEC model, the new engineering contract model. Under the NEC format, there is a system encouraging collaborative efforts on the subcontractor, the main contractor, and the consultant side to work out wrinkles. We have one-stop electronic platforms at various levels to monitor the progress of the work. in terms of the resources put in and so on. Now, that is called the RCIS form. So these are forms for requesting inspection. Consultants need to keep track of the time of replying to questions and submitting reports. So on these platforms, we can check whether certain indicators are met. We can put these KPIs on the large dashboard on screen. When the same bidder is departing from the norms too much, we can give them a warm reminders to avoid disputes. Now, paragraph 16, the reward or bonus scheme for projects of a scale higher than $400 million. How many contractors were awarded this bonus and how much cost has been saved? Whenever changes are made, the contractors need to apply for approval from the government. So will that delay the completion of the project? Now, for the tendering process, usually the amendments are quite minor. Second, over the past few years, we have been adopting advanced technologies on a large scale. After some successful pilot projects, it seems that we haven't yet been able to popularize the model across the industry. For example, the remote hoisting system, or remote crane system, have incentives been given to contractors in terms of subsidies or procurement support so that more industry stakeholders would introduce the use of this remote tower crane system. Another question, in terms of manpower, we have the supplementary labor scheme for the construction industry. Some 10,000 permits have been issued, and so far 4,000 workers have come. So for large-scale construction sites with a lot of non-local workers, have we been keeping tab of the costs saved? If that is proven to be successful, we can consider expanding the program further. Mr. Frankie Fong, thank you. Paragraph 16, the bonus. The reward mechanism is pretty new. It was just rolled out last month. At the construction stage, on-site, we often see a scenario where architects or contractors have new ideas in terms of construction method or design, which can save cost and time. So in the past, we have this reward system, but that is limited to contractors only. If the contractor can give us an alternative plan with some efficiency merit, we will split the cost saved with the contractors. However, for consultants, we don't used to have any reward system to reward costs saved by consultants. Now, if the professionals can identify room for enhancing efficiency on site, or if they can convince the contractors to accept their efficiency improvements plan, then we will make use of this reward system to encourage winning scenarios for all three parties. So we will review the efficiency or effectiveness of this program before we report to members again. In terms of adoption of technology, we adopt a pilot use principle, and then we will make it mandatory. In the process, we will roll out subsidies and provide incentives. That's piloting, mandating, and incentive. This is a three-step approach. We have seen some good results in the past. For example, when we roll out the BIM, Building Information Modeling System, and the MIC system, and also the 4S Smart Site Safety Management System, we have adopted the same model. We will not cast everything in stone at the beginning. We will give some free rein to the market. When the technology becomes more mature, for those feasible technologies, we will mandate the use of these technologies. We have an innovation subsidy funding scheme for the construction industry to help SMEs adopt technologies. The subsidy level is as high as 70 to 80% for some programs. In terms of manpower, we do have the supplementary labor scheme for the construction industry. We haven't conducted an empirical-based cost-effectiveness analysis. However, according to the feedback from contractors, it seems that manpower supply has stabilized. This is very important. When the schedule is tight, especially towards the late stage of the project, we need to employ more people and procure more construction materials to finish the project. That would undermine cost effectiveness and productivity. So the supplementary labor scheme did help cut down labor costs, but we don't have a scientific analysis.
Mr. Ben Chen. Thank you, Chairman. Overall speaking, I see that the government has been making very effective efforts and proposing good measures. Take NEC as an example, it has been helping to reduce cost. ECI as well. You're introducing a contractor early under this model and come up with a good solution. I think all these measures have yielded results. It is mentioned in the paper that there is a reward mechanism. Depending on whether the design can help reduce cost, a reward might be given. According to some construction workers, the density of concrete is so high that they cannot insert steel bars. There might be situations in which contractors try to put in more materials in order to make more money. So it really depends on how much reward you are giving to the contractors and how much profit the contractors are making. I hope the government can be more pragmatic so that all parties would be willing to devote more in implementing this reward mechanism. On DBO, the panel on transport visited Shanghai, and we have made some observations there. From construction, investment, as well as operation, these are all done by the contractors. And the operation period is rather long. In order to save cost, the contractors introduce a lot of technologies to help them with the operation. I think DBO, or what Mr. Edward Lau mentioned about the DBIFO, could facilitate the adoption of technologies. I have a question for the administration. you rarely encourage people to make investments in public works projects. With this financial environment or situation, can you introduce more investments? On one hand, the government wouldn't have to settle the bill early. On the other hand, you'll have someone to help operate the projects, and you'll be able to bring in capital through investments. How would the government address this kind of demand in the market? My second question, for the direct procurement model, you plan to procure materials directly so that contractors can focus on the construction works and that they wouldn't have to pay so much attention to the fluctuation of prices of materials. And the rise in material costs would have to be borne by the government instead. How would the government reduce risks? If the government has to bear the risks, that means the taxpayers will have to shoulder the costs. On the direct procurement model, what kind of concrete measures are you going to ensure an effective procurement model? Thank you. Permanent Secretary. Different types of materials might be involved in a public construction works. We often abide by certain standards and we stick to the standards during construction work. So we will review this. According to the paper, we are inviting the BTRI to conduct the review for us. We will look at the design standards. For example, we will look at the loading capacity of concrete. We also look at grade 3 foundation and its loading requirements. We've done some lab tests and we found that the loading requirement could be set at a higher level, so we've changed this design standards. We see that there could be room for improvement, and if we're able to improve these standards, we might need fewer construction materials in the future, and this will help drive down costs and help speed up construction progress, because fewer construction materials would be used. In terms of the reward mechanism, we need a three-party collaborative approach. We've talked to the trade before we introduced this reward mechanism. We think this is a good mechanism because we can encourage each other to think about how we can reduce construction costs and save time. We encourage the participation of all three parties to make things work. I think this reward mechanism is popular among the trade, and we do want to see results. On investment in the private market, as mentioned, we are adopting an open mind. For example, large-scale disposal land approach is a new approach that we're introducing. It involves private investments as well. As to whether we can implement this approach in all infrastructure works, well, we aren't so sure about this because the government is not an expert in this regard. If the private sector thinks that it is possible for us to implement this model, we will look into it. The infrastructure works are operated or implemented in a commercial basis, so we will think about investment. In the past, we adopted the subcontracting labor and procurement model, and risks arose, and the contractors would have to bear the risks. That is the risk premium. When we talk to the trade, we realize that some large-scale contractors, they adopted their own bulk purchasing as well. They could save costs by about 10%. For the government, if we adopt our own procurement model, it would involve multiple projects. We would make procurement for several projects at a time, and I believe it could be even more cost effective. How can this model help offset risks? As mentioned, we will have to carry out certain studies. We have to look at how many of these projects in which we can implement this procurement model. How can we try to minimize risks? Also, will we be able to make an estimate of the percentage of risk? Say we adopt the direct procurement model and we can save costs by 15%. And if the risk is just a few percentage point, then still we will be able to reduce costs. And by making this kind of estimate, it would be easier for us to make a decision. Ms. Doreen Kong. Chairman, I've looked at the paper and I've listened to the presentation of the administration. I'm glad to see that the Development Bureau has been working hard. It's been trying to reduce construction costs. My observation is that I think there is a lot that the government has to do, and there needs to be prioritization. I see that you are going to implement different measures, and I wonder which measures you are going to prioritize. I want to know if you are going to identify the priority items. You've mentioned in your PowerPoint presentations time and again about incentives and commercial. How can you ensure that tenders have the incentives to help reduce costs? You mentioned the word commercial. I understand that we are talking about public works projects here. However, we have to understand that all these projects are run on a commercial principle or basis. I think you're heading to the right direction. I hope you can keep up with the good efforts. Paragraph 11 of the paper mentions that there will be a bonus score system. You are trying to encourage large-scale contractors to partner with small and medium-sized firms. In 2023, in 25 public works projects, 21 of which saw this kind of partnership. How can you ensure that this kind of joint venture models won't be implemented for the sake of it? You are introducing this bonus score system, and I want to know if you have talked to the trade to see if this kind of system can actually help. Paragraph 20 of the paper says that you are introducing the use of remote tower crane system developed by the mainland. And this system has been used in one of the projects already, right? Do you have any information about the factors you will take into account when you decide whether to use this type of tower crane system? How do you incentivize contractors to use this kind of system?
Mr. Ricky Lau. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Doreen Kong. Prioritization is important. There are lots of projects which we can consider how to reduce the cost. For example, design standards of works projects. Different types of works projects have their own standards. Drainage pipes, water treatment system, government buildings, footbridges. There are different specific design standards. There are lots of facilities we are using. In one single government building, there are more than 100 types of facilities to be procured. So we need to roll out the cost control measures in different phases. We have been listening to the experience shared by contractors. Some contractors have made an effort to identify cost-effective facilities or products. Some succeeded, but some were of no avail. So we would like to apply the 80-20 ratio so that in the long run we can achieve cost effectiveness. In the first phase, we will review the specs, the specifications and standards from scratch. We need to identify those highly impactful components and prioritize in enhancing them. Now, incentives and commercial principles are very important. To make something cost effective, we need to ensure that all stakeholders are benefited. So we are trying to distribute the gain from cost reduction fairly among stakeholders. At the same time, we will ensure that there is a reasonable profit margin in our projects to encourage the market in investing in cost control measures. Now, the bonus system for consultants. There are some larger consultancy firms which are very successful bidders of our contracts. This is because of the economies of scale and the experience. But this may not be the best thing for the entire ecosystem. So we would like to see more consultancy firms of various scales to be involved in a large-scale projects that would enhance the manpower supply. At the same time, by introducing competition, it may help reducing cost. Now, on the contract, whether it is a joint venture or a subcontracting relationship, the bidder needs to demonstrate the relationship really exists. Now, in terms of remote tower crane system, the industry has a difficulty hiring capable tower crane operators because it is a tough job. The operator needs to climb up and down to use the bathroom or have food. So technology can come into play here. This has already happened in other places. In the first quarter, we have adopted remote tower crane system in our sites on a pilot basis. There is a significant reduction of labor hours. It saves a lot of time for the operators climbing up and down the crane, and that may translate into 10% of labor cost or work time saved. I will invite my colleagues to supplement on the other details. Please be brief. Thank you. On the contract, even when we encourage participation by SMEs together with large companies, we do require at least 10% of manpower supplied by the smaller partner. Now, for public works projects, the percentage is set at 20%. Now, after the commencement of the contracts or the services, our team would be monitoring the delivery of the project to ensure that the division of labor is arranged in accordance with the reported figure. Dr. Lo Wai-kwok. Thank you, Chairman. First, I commend Mr. Ricky Lau, the Permanent Secretary for Development's work. His team has been pragmatically reviewing the issues of high construction cost and long work timetable for our works projects. From the paper, we can see that they have not dodged the difficult issues. About the tendering mechanism, from the PowerPoint just now, we saw that whether it is consultancy contracts or works engineering contracts, the technical aspect accounts for a high percentage of the overall score. In the past, technical score accounted for a lower percentage. Now, the situation where bidders try to win the bid with an unreasonably low bid has become more rare. Over the past 3 years, there were 12 works projects contracts and 7 consultancy contracts were removed because of this. Now, I want to know the total number of contracts awarded over the past 3 years so that we know the percentage of bids removed because of the unreasonably low price. In terms of construction materials, direct procurement or even a central procurement model are both feasible. In terms of direct procurement, that may be easier to materialize, and there are some suitable works projects already using this model. For example, MIC components and also water treatment plants directly procuring MIC components. I hope that can be more widespread. In the past, the norm was subcontracting. However, construction materials were very costly. Of course, that varies for different projects, but that is a heavy commitment along the capital chain. So this is a good thing. About the central procurement model, I agree that for some common construction materials, they can be procured by the government on a centralized basis. This will reduce the risk premium for contractors. Still, it is not an easy task to build a common material warehouse. It is a big problem that we don't have the space for storing construction materials. So once again, I urge the government to set aside land to build an industry park for the construction industry. This is a problem that I have returned to time and again. Permanent Secretary. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Lo. On the bidding mechanism, I will invite my colleagues to report the figures over the past years. Centralized procurement and direct procurement. Dr. Lo is right. We have seen some successes. We will invite individual departments to identify materials which they can engage in direct procurement. For central procurement or centralized procurement, that only applies to common materials. A centralized procurement approach can help us control the uncertainties better. In the past, because of delivery delay, some construction materials arrived late, and that affected the progress of the work. If the contractor is the one procuring the construction materials. They will have to pay upfront first, and that would cause a burden on their capital flow or cash flow. In terms of central warehouse for construction materials, we will definitely consider that. The volume is enormous. Now we have some government warehouses, but the contractors also have their own warehouses. We can explore which is more feasible. I personally inclined to the latter because that is more convenient. We just have to work out the retrieval process of the construction materials. About industry park, I understand that is Dr. Low's pet project. I have been talking to the Secretary for Development about this as well. Some lands have been set aside on Longkutan and other areas, but we need to work out the details further. Mr. Dennis Leung. Thank you, Chairman. I thank the Development Bureau for implementing measures to reduce construction costs in works projects. I agree with the 4 major directions. Still, on the 24th and 25th in August, I went to Shenzhen. One of the places I visited was the Children's Park in Longgang. I talked to the builder and operator of that park. That is a joint venture comprising 2 to 3 companies. Now, unlike our model where there is a main contractor who won the bid and then subcontracts the works to subsidiary contractors, their model is interesting. The joint venture would be hiring the employees were hired directly by the investors. And then the joint venture was just responsible for running the project. The government, on the other hand, would monitor the performance of the joint venture, and a reward would be given based on the performance. Now, the operating period is very long, 8 years long. In the process, materials or replacement parts would have a fixed price. The price would be locked in. So that's how the government is controlling the cost of the projects. On the 8th of November, I handled the labor issue as the construction site of the Tongchong Area 100. Now, under the Housing Authority or the Housing Department, they adopt a model called nominated contractor. Now, one of the contractors is responsible for the electrical and mechanical side of things. They were hired by the Housing Department directly, and then the main contractor would be responsible for supervising the contractor. Now, the construction cost borne by this company directly reflects that being borne by the Housing Department. So there is the entire mechanism is very transparent, and there is no room for making a gain along the chain. So can we adopt this model elsewhere? So rather than allowing the main contractors to hire their own subcontractors, why don't we nominate the subcontractors to the supervisor, that is the main contractor? We would be the one directly hiring the employees. True, the Construction Industry Council has set a minimum wage for construction workers. However, that is not materialized on site because of the various layers of subcontractors. So by adopting this model as Deng Chung, we can ensure that the recommended level of wages is kept.
Permanent Secretary. We'll look at the case you have just brought up. The member mentioned a number of examples. I believe in Longgang, they adopted a management model. So one company is responsible for the management, and the party will deal with the contractors directly. A lot of our colleagues working on public works projects, they have to deal with the management as well. So we might draw reference from this model. On the recruitment of workers, it really depends on the stability of the amount of works we have. If we do not have a stable number of works, we might not be able to recruit long-term workers. Dozens of years ago, there were companies that recruited workers directly in Hong Kong. However, there is certain limitation that we face if there isn't a stable number of projects. On nominating subcontractors, in some types of projects that involve especially electrical and mechanical works or lifts, we adopt this model. This is because it allows us to look for a suitable contractor, but we'll have to work with the principal contractor. There are pros and cons to this model. We'll see what kind of works contracts under which we can adopt this model. Thank you. Now it's my turn. I have a couple of questions. Under the ECI model, well, there are certain things that I do not understand. During the design phase, there was no clue which contractor would take part in the project. So how can you allow early identification of design problems or risks? I want to know how this model is implemented under the early contractor involvement approach. And also, why don't you adopt the design and build model? This will save you time from coming to the Legislative Council to ask for funding. For complicated projects, you adopt design and build, but for ordinary roadworks or footbridges, you opt for the conventional model. Also, on the new engineering contract model, I understand that it could allow you to grant reward or save costs. I want to know how many of the projects are carried out through option C under the new engineering contract form. Also, a number of members have mentioned about the procurement model. It has to do with the supply chain. In modern procurement model, it's not that you can do bulk purchasing and you store all the materials in one place. You have to think about how much concrete or steel bars you need, and then you do bulk purchasing. You don't have to have all the materials delivered to Hong Kong in one go and then store them in one place. Most of these materials come from the mainland. You can pay the money in one go and then you can have the materials delivered in batches. I want to know your thoughts on this. Also, you've mentioned about paperless procedures. I know that you have a digital platform now. According to the trade, they have to upload the papers to the cloud, and then they have to have a CD-ROM ready. And I think this is a lot of effort too. Can you save all the paperwork? Because this is also money. Thank you. Permanent Secretary. Let me talk about design and build first. We use the design and build model in complicated projects because we want contractors to bring in new construction methods to help reduce costs and streamline the entire process. In terms of proposals to reduce costs, actually contractors can put forward these proposals under the design and build model. In design and build contracts, if there are any proposals to reduce costs, contractors can feel free to raise them. Recently, we came to the Legislative Council for funding approval for a cyclone road works. In that particular project, we list out certain parameters in the contracts. The contractor has already got the bid, and we have entered into a contract with the contractors. Before construction works begin, contractors have to work with the owners as well as the government on the detailed design. And during the design phase, there should be enhancement measure proposed by the contractor to reduce costs. In the cyclone project I mentioned, the contractor proposed using a retaining wall for supporting. The contractor reviewed the foundation of the retaining wall and adjusted the design based on the site conditions. Also, the contractor in that particular project made use of a particular type of pipework to facilitate the works of the utilities public utilities organizations, and 70% of the cost was saved. I believe you probably got the information from the Highways Department about that project. During tendering processes, we sometimes invite contractors to talk to us about the design proposals to see if there is any room for improvement or refinement. And then we can adjust the tenders. There is a Kevin Works project in Anderson Hill, and we adopted this approach, and the construction cost was significantly reduced compared to our original estimate. So this is what we mean by early involvement of contractors. On the adoption of NEC, perhaps I'll ask Mr. Ho to give you more information. He'll tell you under which circumstances we can adopt NEC. On the procurement model, both direct and central procurement will involve storage of materials. We hope that we can have a warehouse in actual practice. We do want a place to store all the materials because when the construction project is kick-started, we want to ensure that there is enough supply of the construction materials we need. On the paperless approach, Well, you see that we have already rolled out certain measures in this regard. For example, we have adopted a digital work supervision system. In the past, contractors would have to work with the consultancy firm to deal with all the paperwork, but now it has all been digitalized. Also, a lot of reports have to be submitted in a public works project. We now ask that all these documents be submitted electronically. Some colleagues told us that for convenience sake, some contractors prefer printing out the papers. We will see if there is a need to do so, and we might allow contractors to do so if they want. However, we do want to go paperless in general. Perhaps Mr. Ho can tell you more about option C under the NEC form. Yes, member is right that there are different options under the NEC form. We have to look at the characters of different types of projects to opt for the right approach. Option C applies to complicated projects in which the scope cannot be clearly defined in the early stage. So there's a mechanism put in place in option C allowing contractors to split the cost. We call it pain game share. This provides incentives to all contracting parties to work proactively on the project to opt for the most effective approach to ensure the smooth implementation of the project. For public works projects that involve an amount over $1 billion, we encourage the public works departments to implement this approach. For projects involving high risks, we also talk to the relevant project teams and offer our advice on which option to use. For simpler projects, which see a lower risk, we normally use option A and option B. Perhaps I can provide the relevant statistics and figures after the meeting. Mr. Gary Zhang. Thank you, Chairman. We've got a lot of details in this paper from the Development Bureau, and it also covers some of the points that we discussed in the previous meetings. We have to look at specific figures as we assess the costs of public works projects. So I do hope that in the future meetings, in the papers that the government provide, there could be more figures and statistics to show the perks of implementing all these proposed measures, and I believe these numbers can facilitate our discussion on this topic. I have a number of questions as well as suggestions. So just now I've offered a suggestion on how we can assess the effectiveness. On the central procurement model, we need to have a standardized design. Then you can maximize the benefits brought by the central procurement model. If different design standards are adopted in different construction works, then it would be hard for you to actually adopt the central procurement model. I hope the BTRI can review whether the design standards as well as the construction materials to be used can be made uniform in the future to facilitate the use of the central procurement model.
Several questions. Now, in some overseas countries, they have a third-party internal reviewing units for construction cost. Now, with an independent approval authority for third-party review, will that lengthen the vetting process even further? About framework procurement, according to the paper, it can reduce money and time cost, and the process will be streamlined. So framework procurement compared with traditional procurement, how does that work? Why is it able to save cost? Now, in terms of the paper itself, many papers mentioned measures to attract new blood to the construction industry because we have an aging labor force. But let's be realistic. In advanced economies everywhere, very few young people would be willing to join the construction industry. That's the same for first-tier cities in the mainland and other places. That is considered to be normal under the market economy. Now, we are such a small economy. What power do we have to go against this market trend? We surely cannot afford to pay $100,000 to hire a single construction worker. That is impossible. So this is the reality we have to face. I don't think we can rise above this market trend. So I wonder what the government thinks about this. Mr. Regulau. Thank you, Chairman, and I thank Mr. Zhang for raising these questions. First, quantifying the cost saved. We are doing a review on this. We have been rolling out individual measures one by one. And for the pilot measures, we have seen some good things. For example, MIC, we have been purchasing the components of the MIC through the new model. Now, compared with the old practice where we ask the contractor to procure the components themselves, significant cost has been saved. But that's just for MIC. What about other construction materials and products? The amount of cost saved would be different, and hence the ratio in the overall cost. But we have seen some good results in individual procurement exercises. Now, central procurement, that is indeed very beneficial in terms of procuring components, construction materials, and facilities or tools. It is easier for us to standardize the procurement standard. Like I said, we will be inviting the BTRI to review the procurement standards among, say, the housing departments, the building departments, and the MSDs, and so on, so that we can communicate a clearer message to the market. Now, construction materials are not too difficult to be procured centralized because the standard is similar. Now, we have the Project Strategy and Control Office. The office monitors the cost control exercise from the very beginning of the project. So it will not add to the time cost of the projects. Like the paper says, we are reviewing how we can streamline the entire approval process. At the design and construction stage, we have identified quite a number of room for improvement according to the stakeholders in the industry. So we will be studying these suggestions. About framework procurement. Now, we have drawn reference to the practice in the UK. Simply put, in a certain time frame that is 3 to 5 years for similar projects. Qualified contractors would be identified in advance. An advance agreement would be signed with these contractors. That's when the projects are rolled out. The contractor would be invited to submit a tender. But before that, an agreement would be reached with the contractors concerning the price tag of the projects. In the UK, this is what they do. They would assign a profit-sharing ratio capped at a certain percentage with the contractors. Now, let's say in the past 4 years, we have set a cap of profit sharing for this type of projects. Then in the next round of the tendering exercise, we will prescribe a similar cap. The contractors can propose a profit sharing ratio underneath that cap. That would provide more incentives for contractors to participate in the project. Now, we would also try to compress the procurement costs so that the contractors can submit a more attractive proposal to us. So that's what the framework procurement model is about. Now, there is one project involving land survey, which will be awarded under this approach. Finally, on the question of attracting young people into the industry, I agree that this is a rather tough job. So how can we attract more young people to join? We have to transition from manual labor to technology-assisted tasks. And also, we have to provide more jobs in the construction industry away from construction sites. So in terms of adoption of advanced technologies, digitalizing the industry and helping the industry to transition to a modernized industry, we have been working very hard on these aspects. The construction industry has a very long history in Hong Kong, but this is not an industry which is very backward. So we hope more young people will be willing to join. That concludes the first round. In the first round, I have allowed a very flexible time for members, but since we will have council meeting very soon, I hope we can conclude the meeting on time at 10:30. So I will only give each member 2 minutes for asking supplementary questions. Mr. Chen Siu-Hong. Thank you, Chairman. Concerning the framework procurement model suggested by Mr. Gary Zhang, the Permanent Secretary has given a reply. According to my experience, in private works projects or public works projects, the framework procurement model has been in use for many years. Now, about framework procurement model, I think this only applies to standardized job or standardized procurement of materials. In the next 3 to 5 years, if there are the need, you should select just a few suppliers and put them on the list. And then when the projects are rolled out, the construction materials should be procured according to a pre-agreed price. And then we should adopt a call-off order model. In that case, the suppliers would be clear about their qualification, that they are already qualified for supplying the materials. Then they can make a better work plan in terms of manpower supply and materials procurement. Now, according to Mr. Ricky Lau, you are taking a step even further. Now, the several suppliers will have to engage in another bidding process in the next 3 to 5 years' time. And also, there is a profit-sharing cap. They can only submit a profit-sharing ratio beneath that cap. But there are a lot of uncertainties. For example, changes in price indices, as well as changes in manpower cost. I'm worried that by doing so, you would be adding to the risk premium to the contractors without streamlining the process. So about that land survey project, besides that one, what other projects do you have in mind? Mr. Ricky Lau. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Chan. True, in the private markets, some players have adopted this model and it has been successful. So we will learn from their experience. Now, the arrangement I mentioned was a hospital project conducted by the UK government. Similar to our hospital projects, they have similar standards and requirements. So if contractors and suppliers are asked to focus on procuring materials for projects in the next 3 to 5 years, first of all, the projects must have a similar nature to make the plan work. So like Mr. Chan said, have we already distributed the work portfolio to the contractors as the initial stage? Well, I think on one hand that can ensure cost effectiveness, but that would take away the competitive elements in the bidding process. If there is a second stage of bidding, then there will be competition and it would be more beneficial for the project owner. But we will study whether it would discourage contractors from joining the process. We will strike a balance. Yes, we surely don't want to see that another bidding process is required. Even though you have 3 contractors on the list, then in the next round, 2 may be excluded. Dr. Junius Ho, thank you for allowing me to speak once I arrived. About construction cost, this is something that I've been concerned about. I have been criticizing 3 things all the time. First, wanton use of consultants. Consultancy fees usually account for 6 to 8% of total cost. Now, there is a decline in recent time, but it is still very high. Now, I admire how the government is trying to pick up speed in works projects. However, in the legislative process, we would set up a subcommittee to study the projects, and then the government would submit it to the public works subcommittees and then the finance committee. So the process is very transparent. Now, the bidding process is not required because the contractors would be proposing a price just beneath the cap to maximize the profit. Now, there have been cases where supplementary appropriation or funding would be submitted to the LegCo, but that is very rare in recent times. So I think for projects under $20 million, you should just let the main contractors to have a free rein. I've visited the Kudong station yesterday. It cost some $200 million, and it will be completed by 2027. It is not technically complicated. Between 2003 and 2007, when the spur line was built, the box culvert concept was adopted. Boring machines went in, and then a box culvert was made to accommodate for the construction of the Northern Link in the next 21 years. The open excavation method was adopted. And also there were some touch-ups for the platforms. So 21 years ago, we have already laid a foundation for the subsequent works. But back then, there was no BIM. When new contracts were awarded, I don't see where the cost is saved compared with 21 years ago. I learned yesterday that the project was not very complicated. It was just some excavation. The major difficulties is the high safety coefficients because there are trains running underground. So 375 meters times 25 meters, it costs some $2 million. I don't think the price is reasonable. And also the top side of the project is so uncharacteristic. I always think that we are spending too much to get a low quality product. And you need to have the expertise before you can ask any pertinent questions. So I don't know whether the government has made plans to cut costs 21 years ago. So these are not shown on paper. I needed to visit the site to learn about this. So maybe the government should put this all out on the paper. Now, with no prior foundation, it would cost $4 billion. But with the previous foundation, it just cost $2 billion.
Please leave time for the administration to give a brief answer. Thank you. On consultants, we're quite stringent in engaging consultants. We need to ensure a certain level of competitiveness. That is, we have to ensure that there is a certain number of consultants bidding for the contracts. From the planning phase to the completion of a works project, the amount of money a consultant charge accounts for 2 to 3% of the overall cost. Oftentimes, when we apply for funding, we have an estimated cost. We adopt an approach where we conduct tendering exercise in parallel to the funding approval process. So when we ask for funding, we have usually commenced the tendering process already. And this can allow us to have a better grasp of how much money we have to pay. For large-scale public works projects, they usually involve more than one contract. It is usually the public works departments that decides how many contracts there will be. And for the Kutung Station project, it is an MTRC project, so I don't have enough information about this. My understanding is that the challenge is that the works have to be carried out on a rail that is being used on a daily basis. Any sedimentation would cause huge safety risks. When the soil is extracted, we have to ensure whether the foundation works could be carried out in a safe manner. Otherwise, it would affect the operation of trains. I don't have detailed information about individual projects. Perhaps Dr. Junius Ho can talk to the relevant departments responsible for this project. Mr. Edward Lau. The Permanent Secretary said he didn't have the details of the project, but I think he made a really good point, and I got the same information when I visited the Kutong station yesterday. Again, I want to ask about the direct procurement model. I think this is a good model. I've been calling for this model with the trade 2 to 3 years ago during pre-COVID times when we saw fluctuation of costs of different construction materials. The trade told us that they have to look at the materials costs in order to decide how much money they could make. So I think this direct procurement model is an appropriate one. But of course, the government should still talk to the trade to see how much impact will be posed on the local suppliers. For the Northern Metropolis Highway, I understand that different investigation works will have to be carried out, site formation works will have to be carried out too. So this procurement model would ensure a certain level of cost efficiency. My other point concerns the review of the design standards. I've said time and again that the design standards imposed might be too stringent. In the past, there was just one fire station in each district. Now we have a lot more fire stations, and you might have to impose a different standard to the design of these fire stations. Do you have a timetable on when you will review or finish reviewing the design standards? Lastly, I want to ask about construction materials. Say the buildings department might ask a contractor to make different registrations for different parts of a site, even for the same construction materials. So I want to know when you will be able to streamline all the processes. Permanent Secretary. We will definitely be in close communication with the trade in relation to the different measures. By adopting the direct procurement model, the government might pose certain impacts on different parties of the trade. As to what kind of impacts they will see, we will definitely be in close talks to them about this. On reviewing the design standards, we will kickstart the process as soon as possible. Say there's a certain design standard that affects the operation of the trade, and we will look at those design standards first. We will ask the BTRI to review the different design standards for different infrastructure works. We will do a study on the scopes. We will make reference to the standards adopted in our country as well as in other places. We will come up with some priority items, because there are many different types of design standards that we have to review, and hopefully by next year we will be able to identify the ones that we need to prioritize. On the point about construction materials, it doesn't just concern the Public Works Department. For example, we want the Buildings Department to be able to use the model as well. We have talked to the relevant bureaus and departments, and they all agree that we should adopt this approach. Mr. Andrew Lam. I want to make 2 points. I want to talk about the e-tendering mechanism. Adopting a paperless approach doesn't mean that you're going full-on digital. Secondly, I believe the government has done a lot of work in implementing a standardized design. If you do not have a standardized design, you won't be able to reduce the construction costs. We have the BTRI now. We want to promote the use of innovative materials. Innovative designs and materials can help reduce costs in some cases. In Hong Kong, we emphasize stability, and it sometimes keeps us from being innovative. So I hope we can have a knowledge bank that includes different types of innovative materials, which will help reduce costs, and at the same time we can build ourselves into a hub in this regard. Permanent Secretary. We are going digital, and going digital is just the first step. Moving forward, we will develop digital twins. This will help with the repair and maintenance works of infrastructures. Also, we need AI to boost productivity, and we have to go digital in order to achieve all these. So this echoes with what Mr. Lam said. On implementing a standardized design, we have to keep in mind safety. We do see room for implementing standardized designs. I gave an example about the use of concrete. Compared with Singapore, our use of concrete is 10% difference compared to Singapore. So we will continue to promote this. Thank you. I'll extend this meeting by 15 minutes. Now it's my turn. My question is straightforward. I want to ask about standardized modules. In public housing, we have different blocks that implement a standardized design. Say for sports grounds and schools, they serve similar functions. For this kind of buildings, can we have standardized modules? Some say that if you use standardized modules, you cannot show the different characteristics and designs of different buildings. You may incorporate different features or elements in the design, but you don't have to have or work on the design from scratch. Can you adopt modules to reduce costs as well as risks? Thank you, Chairman. We agree. Standardized designs can help enhance productivity and help contain construction costs. They can also help us improve the design. the Architectural Services Department is looking at whether it is possible to use MIC modules in building government dormitories or quarters. We can perhaps set a fixed number or quantity of the modules that we're going to use, and we might, in this regard, adopt the direct procurement model too. We've talked to the buildings department about this, and they are carrying out relevant studies now.
So we hope that the standardized approach can be adopted at a wider scale. Dr. Junius Ho. I write on the previous question asked by Mr. Andrew Lam. Paperless system doesn't mean that it is digitalized. So in considering the reasonableness of price for designs and construction contracts, I think we have to consider the digitalization at several components. Now we have 1,100 kilometers square of land. It hasn't changed over the past hundreds of years. So I think we need to be very accurate in terms of land survey, but I think feasibility study is superfluous. We have the data all along, but we haven't digitalized the process. So there have been repetitive processes all the time. We have so many buildings in Hong Kong. Our land is packed with buildings. There is a building plan for each building, and we have the building plans as the building department. So you don't have to conduct a survey from scratch. You can save a lot of costs on land drilling. For example, we know that there are buildings with piles driven 40 meters down the ground, so you need to put the train tunnel even more down below. Now the alignment of trains and also the utilities pipes alignment, the data is all there. But it seems that whenever we do a works project, everything becomes uncharted territory again. We are doing the survey and investigation works from scratch. We are only now beginning to talk about BIM, but BIM is already in its 7th version. Please leave some time for the administration to answer. Now, schools, housing estates, and so on, and schools and roads, there are parameters. It would be unreasonable to set a per square foot price as $3,000 for a housing unit with no renovation. So I think we should refer to all the references. Now we will discuss that later. Permanent Secretary, please. Thank you, Dr. Junius Ho. We agree that we need to step up on the use of digital technology to enhance our overall efficiency. Now about land drilling or underground survey information, we do have some digital data. On how we can better utilize these data, we will talk to the relevant departments. We have been promoting the use of BIM over the past several years, and we are moving towards the digitalization approach. In the past, some data were not kept on the digital database, so we will try to migrate them to the digital database. Looking ahead, it's not about collecting data, it's more about utilizing the data to maximize their use. So big data is the first step. After collecting the big data, we can think about other things like digital twins and use of AIs. These will be rolled out in the future. Chairman, just a follow-up question. I agree with the digitalization move, but we have been talking about that for a long time. We have to utilize the centralized data So these are just basic steps which we haven't taken. It's not too late, though. Starting from this day, different departments will have to think about this. Every year, the Finance Committee is approving $100 billion each year. It's better late than never. I think Dr. Gini's Ho only means that we need to share the data among departments to enhance the cost effectiveness. If there is no other matter, some points about the next meeting. The next meeting's item is about ensuring sufficient labor supply in the construction industry and the adoption of advanced technology, and also reviewing the work process and work supervision model of public works. Dates and time of the meeting, these will be decided later. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.